The afternoon sun shimmered on the surface of the lake, turning it into a mirror of molten gold. A breeze carried the faint smell of pine from the woods behind us, and the laughter of children mingled with the soft splash of water against the dock. It was the kind of day you dream about all winter. Warm enough to stretch out in the grass, cool enough to keep the mosquitoes at bay, and quiet enough that the only interruptions were the occasional calls of loons from across the water. My friends had driven in from the city to visit for the weekend, and everyone had been buzzing with excitement about spending the day by the lake. We spread out chairs, a checkered picnic blanket, and a cooler filled with drinks. The kids had discovered the joys of launching themselves off the dock with shrieks that rang through the air, while the adults settled into easy conversations. Someone had set up a Bluetooth speaker, playing a mellow playlist that floated around us like background music to a perfect summer scene. For a few blissful hours, time seemed to stop. I leaned back in my chair, sipping from a sweating glass of lemonade, and let the sun warm my face. The world felt far away. Emails, deadlines, and obligations had no place here. I remember thinking that this was exactly why I had worked so hard to buy this land. It wasn't just property. It was freedom. That's when I saw her. She appeared on the path leading down from the subdivision, her presence as sharp and out of place as a hornet buzzing through a picnic. Karen. The name had become almost mythical in our neighborhood, whispered with a mix of dread and disbelief. I'd heard plenty of stories from other residents. The fines she handed out for unsightly garden gnomes, the way she measured grass height with a ruler, the lectures about recycling bins not being pulled back from the curb within an acceptable time frame, and now she was striding toward us, clipboard clutched like a weapon, sunglasses covering half her face, a wide-brimmed visor shadowing the rest. Her expression could have curdled milk. I sighed, already bracing myself. My throat is too, conversations pittering out mid-sentence. The kids, oblivious, kept splashing in the water, but the adults grew still. We all knew trouble when we saw it. Karen didn't waste a second. As soon as she reached the edge of the grass, she planted her feet like a general surveying an enemy camp. "Excuse me," she announced, her voice sharp enough to cut through the music. "What exactly do you think you're doing here?" No one answered at first. My friend stared at me, silently passing the responsibility. After all, I was the homeowner. The lake, the dock, the land. It was mine. So I set my drink down slowly and rose from my chair. "We're just enjoying the afternoon," I said evenly. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. She raised the clipboard, flipping a page as though she were about to read charges aloud in a courtroom. "You're in violation of HO Policy 4.3, subsection B. No resident may host gatherings exceeding 6 guests without prior written approval from the Homeowners Association. And by my count," she swept her hand dramatically toward the group, "you've got at least 15 people here." And my friends shifted uncomfortably, as though they were all suddenly trespassers. Someone muttered an apology under their breath. Karen latched onto the discomfort, clearly feeding off it. "And furthermore," she continued, "swim in the lake without HOA approved flotation devices. It's a safety issue." She broke off to scribble something furiously on her clipboard, as if each mark on the page was another nail in my coffin. The confidence in her posture suggested she'd done this countless times before, storming into situations, drowning people in rules, leaving them cowed and humiliated. I could feel the tension rising behind me. Friends who had been relaxed minutes ago now sat stiff in their chairs, eyes darting between us. One of the moms called her kids out of the water, the fun draining from their faces as they trudged back up the dock, dripping and confused. Karen, seeing the effect she had, smiled thinly. "I'll need everyone to leave immediately," she said. "This lake is for HOA members and their approved guests only. No exceptions. If you refuse, I'll have to escalate this to the board, and fines will be issued. Substantial fines." The words, substantial fines, hung in the air like a storm cloud. She looked around, making eye contact with each adult, waiting for the fear to settle. It was a performance, one she had perfected. I felt my jaw tighten, though I forced myself to stay calm. I had learned long ago that people like Karen thrived on the reaction, anger, panic, compliance. Deny them that satisfaction, and their entire strategy wobbled. "Karen," I started carefully, "this is actually..." She cut me off, raising a hand like a traffic cop. "No excuses. The rules are the rules. You knew them when you bought property here. And as a board member, it is my responsibility to enforce them. You can argue all you like, but it won't change a thing. Everyone must leave." Now, the silence that followed was heavier than before. My friends looked at me anxiously, waiting for me to either comply or explode. The children clung to their parents, unsure why their fun had been interrupted. Even the music from the speaker seemed too loud now, so one of the guests hurried to turn it off, leaving only the sound of water lapping gently against the dock. Karen stood there, pen poised like a sword, convinced she'd already won. She had swooped in, laid down the law, and was fully expecting us to pack up and scatter like chastised children. But instead of moving, I simply took a slow step forward, closing the distance between us until I was standing just a few feet away. She tilted her chin up, clearly ready for whatever excuse I was about to sputter out, already preparing her next line about compliance and bylaws. I let the silence hang for another heartbeat, the kind that makes people fidget, before I finally spoke. "Karen," I says it, keeping my voice low and measured, "this isn't HOA property." Though for a second, she blinked behind those oversized sunglasses, thrown off by the calmness of my tone. Usually, when she pulled her clipboard stunt, people scrambled, apologized, or raised their voices defensively. She wasn't used to someone speaking quietly, deliberately, as if they held a card she didn't know was in the deck. "What are you talking about?" she said briskly, recovering her footing. "This lake belongs to the association. It's part of the community common grounds. I suggest you review your covenants before you embarrass yourself further." I didn't move. I just lifted my hand and pointed behind her, toward a wooden stake with bright orange paint still clinging to the top. Another marker, half hidden by tall grass, stood a few feet away. They were small, subtle enough that most people would miss them, but I had placed them myself with the surveyor last year when I bought the lot. "See that?" I said. "That's the property line. Everything from that marker down to the water." I gestured to the stretch of lawn where my friend sat nervously, to the dock, to the kids' abandoned pool noodles bobbing in the waves. "All of this is mine." Pryhay, not her lips parted, but no words came out. I could almost hear the gears grinding in her head as she tried to process the information. She glanced toward the stakes back at me, then down at her clipboard like it might have an answer scribbled in the margins. That's not possible," she stammered finally, her voice cracking in a way I had never heard before. "The lake belongs to the community. It's in the bylaws." "Not this section," I said evenly. "I've checked the county records if you don't believe me. My deed includes lakefront rights. I bought this land specifically because it had them. Which means," I took another step closer, letting each word sink in, "I can invite as many guests as I want. I don't need your approval, your permission, or your fines." Behind me, I heard one of my friends smother a laugh. Another let out a low whistle. The tension began to shift, like a rubber band stretching too far and finally snapping loose. Karen's face flushed pink above the collar of her crisp polo shirt. She opened her mouth again, then closed it. Her hand twitched on the clipboard as though she wanted to write something but couldn't think of what. For once, the rule enforcer had no rule to stand on. I'll have to verify that," she said, her tone wobbling between indignation and doubt. "Go ahead," I said, folding my arms. "Verify it. Call the county clerk. Dig through the records. But until then, you don't get to come onto my property and order my guests around." The silence stretched again, but this time it didn't weigh on us. It weighed on her. Every second she stood there without a comeback made her authority look smaller, hollower. My friends started to relax, picking up conversations, sipping their drinks. A couple of the kids, sensing the storm had passed, tiptoed back toward the dock. Karen noticed all of it, and the loss of control only deepened the lines around her mouth. She turned sharply, muttering something about checking the bylaws. As she stormed back up the path, her visor bobbing with each furious step. The sound of her sandals slapping against the dirt faded until it was gone entirely. And then, just like that, the air shifted. Someone clapped. Another cheered. Within seconds, the whole group erupted into laughter and applause, the mood snapping back like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. One of my friends raised his can of beer in salute. "Man, I thought we were about to get evicted from your lawn." Another chimed in, grinning. "I've never seen someone's face do that before." Like she swallowed a lemon whole. The kids hooped and ran back to the water, leaping off the dock with renewed energy, their splashes punctuating the celebration. The speaker clicked back on, music resuming as if nothing had happened. Conversations picked up, louder and freer now, fueled by the collective relief of having watched the neighborhood tyrant retreat in defeat. I sank back into my chair, letting the water roll over me, and took another sip of my lemonade. The ice had melted, but it didn't matter. Everything tasted better after a victory like that. It wasn't just about standing up to Karen. It was about the principle. People like her thrived on intimidation, on making others believe they had no choice but to comply. Most folks didn't have the time or the energy to fight back, so they grumbled in private while she strutted around unchecked. But the truth was, her power only extended as far as people let it. And today, on my land, she had none. I watched the sun sink lower on the horizon, streaking the sky in shades of orange and pink, and thought about how fitting it was. The whole scene, the golden water, the easy laughter, the kids' joyful shrieks. This was exactly why I had chosen this place. Not to be policed, not to be boxed in by arbitrary rules, but to have a slice of freedom where I could live on my terms. As the evening deepened, fireflies began to flicker at the edges of the trees. We lit a small bonfire in the fire pit near the shore, roasting marshmallows and telling stories. Every so often, someone would bring up Karen's stunned expression, and the group would dissolve into laughter all over again. The story had already become part of the day's folklore, something we'd retell for years whenever we gathered here. And in the back of my mind, I wondered how long it would take before Karen returned, armed with whatever she thought she could find in her binder of rules. But even if she did, it didn't matter. The facts were on my side and she knew it now. For the first time in a long while, the lake felt truly mine.